Good news out of Washington when it comes to the unborn and families. The House passed a bill that would allow for the funding of a 529 education savings plan for babies in the womb. David Christensen with the Family Research Council's Government Affairs Office is here to tell us more. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Tell us about this provision in the tax code which recognized the unborn.
Well, it would be the first time that in the IRS code, a child would include an unborn child. And a provision was added to the Family Savings Act. Representative Mike Kelly sponsored that bill to expand education accounts, as you said, 529 education accounts for dependents. And that would include children, including an unborn child. So that would let parents, for instance, start a 529 education account when they're pregnant. It would allow grandparents to contribute into a 529 education savings account if their children, they discovered, hey, we're going to be grandparents. So it's really a pro-life policy from the standpoint of the tax code. It recognizes the child as an unborn child. And one interesting thing to know, this really is not an anti-abortion provision. This is really just a pro-life, and it is a pro-family. It allows parents and grandparents to start earlier for their kids' education. There's
also good news related to adoptions, I understand. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, no, good question. There's another provision in the bill that this bill would effectively allow parents to take out of their retirement accounts early, penalty-free, if it was for newborn children or adoptive kids. So it's, again, a very pro-family piece of legislation. Right now, if you take your retirement money out, you'll get really clobbered by Uncle Sam taking that out of your retirement accounts early. This would allow parents to do that if they have newborn children or adopted kids. It's very pro-adoption, pro-child, pro-family. This is something that we at FRC strongly support, and I think pro-family and pro-life individuals around the country can really rally behind.
Tell us what it does for homeschoolers, the bill.
Well, that's a good question, too. In the tax reform package that became law last December, that President Trump signed into law, there was an effort to expand education accounts, these 529 accounts, to include not only public and private schools for K through 12, but also homeschoolers. Unfortunately, that provision didn't make it, the provision on homeschooling didn't make it through the Senate process. But it did include parochial K through 12 schools. This bill that the House just passed would include homeschool children. That way, it's not biasing federal tax policy towards private schools or public schools or homeschooling. It gives all parents an equal opportunity to use those kinds of accounts for the education of their children. This is again a very great piece of legislation from a pro-family, pro-education standpoint.
David, is this part of more tax reform and tax breaks for Americans? What else is part of this bill or in the works?
Well, this was one of three bills that the House just passed, sent it over to the Senate. As you've already discussed, the Senate's pretty busy right now with the nomination process, but may take up a tax bill. The other tax bill that I think people would be interested in is it permanently extended the individual tax rate reductions that last year's tax reform package put into effect. I think it was 8 years that the lower tax rates, individual rates, because of budget costs, this bill would actually make them permanent. And 10 Democrats, I think, voted for it. Republicans voted for it. We'll see if the Senate takes it up. This is another pro-growth, pro-family type of policy. And then the third bill was business innovation. That bill passed as well, letting small businesses basically get better tax breaks so that they can innovate, create more jobs, and help our economy.
And quickly, back to the first bill, remind our viewers of the name of it and how you think it will do in the Senate.
It's a Family Savings Act. That's Representative Kelly's bill. I think it's a bill that the Senate could pass. There certainly might be some quibbling over whether or not it should define an unborn child as a child for the purposes of 529 accounts. But I do think that there's a lot of support for the idea that these accounts are really good for education policy for parents and families. And I think ultimately constituents need to weigh in with their senators. And I think put pressure on them to support this type of policy.
All right, David Christensen with the Family Research Council. Thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me on.